Rebuilding physical intimacy with your husband after you have kids, and especially when your kids are super young, can feel like an uphill battle. Sure, it could be the logistics of getting intimate, like you ain't got no time, you ain't got no energy. But I want to talk to you about the 3 fears that might be interfering with your physical intimacy and rebuilding that connection with your husband. So, going in, Mother Hen, let's have a chat about how to rebuild that, getting rid of these fears, and move into a place where you're more connected with your husband. So before we get into the conversation, typically I would use the word, you know what word I'm trying to say, but I don't know if they're going to mark my content as explicit. And listen, I want to get this message to you. So we're just going to use physical intimacy. Just know I'm talking about getting your eggs cracked. Okay? Amen. So my husband and I laugh about the expectations we had about our intimacy life versus the reality of our intimacy life. And you have to know the backstory of the fact that we waited to be intimate until we got married. When we got married, Coach, we were just living our best life, swooped up and got pregnant month 1. Month 1 in the game, we was having so much fun, got pregnant. Although we love her, okay, she was not planned to be here at that particular moment. Then she got here and like, okay, you get a little bit more freedom. Boom. When she was 4 months, we had the other one. The shockery that fell over the both of us cannot be explained in any video, any podcast that I ever do. But we laugh about how much our expectations about how that life would go when reality we started having babies out the gate, and it shifted some things. It changed some things within that physical intimacy. And I think that's true for a lot of my clients and a lot of the moms that I talk to, that with along the hormonal and the body changes and just with the non-stop movement of our mind and our bodies as we're trying to keep up with our little ones, at the end of the day, Coach, I want to go to sleep. Okay? I don't want to be in the sheets to do nothing but sleep. But that impacts the way that you connect in that way. Like I said earlier, it is the logistics of not having energy, not having time, etc. But it is also these 3 fears. The first fear I want to talk about is the fear of getting pregnant again. Now, I understand that there are different levels of fertility, and every mom has their own journey of getting pregnant, when they wanted to, when they didn't want to. So when I talk about this fear of getting pregnant again, I'm talking about it from this sense of pregnancy trauma, birth trauma, or even going through IVF. So if you've had a difficulty throughout your pregnancy, I'm talking all day sickness, not just morning, because they lied to us. Okay, having HG or being hospitalized, going through depression or intense anxiety through your pregnancy, having a history of miscarriage, having to go through that IVF journey and the poking of the needles and all the appointments and having to be faced with the worries of, is everything okay? All of that can come to its head in your intimacy life, because obviously our bodies are way more smart than we give it credit for. It understands that with the trauma that we endured during pregnancy, birth, or just the process of getting there was hurtful. In some kind of way, it impacted your thoughts about intimacy. Listen, every time we go to lay down and do the do, there could be a chance that we end up pregnant, right? Or every time that part of the month, because every day we can get pregnant. But that when we're ovulating, if we lay down and do the do, there's a high possibility that we're going to get pregnant. And when you've had trauma around that, your body is like, Coach, we're not doing that. So what happens? You clam up, you get anxious about even having the conversation of physical intimacy. You clam up and get anxious about laying down at night. You clam up and get anxious about your husband coming up and rubbing or touching on you, or him getting all close. You're like, listen, I'm tired. I ain't got time for that. Sometimes, yes, again, it might be that you're tired and you don't have energy, but also could it be that you have a fear of getting pregnant again? And I think really being able to address this fear comes down to, one, yes, talking and processing how that experience was for you, but also inviting your husband into that conversation. A lot of times we will go through the motions and the ups and downs and the highs and lows of having those thoughts about physical intimacy without ever having the conversation with your husband. The one person who needs to know about how you feel about your fear of getting pregnant again doesn't actually truly know. Maybe you've said it, I'm not trying to get pregnant. That was way too much. But you haven't gone into an in-depth conversation about what do you do next? Now that you have identified that you have a fear of getting pregnant, what next? What things do you like or dislike that are going to help you feel a little bit more at ease when it comes to enjoying, not just having, but enjoying physical intimacy with your husband? Okay, so that's fear number one. Fear number two is the fear of being vulnerable. Physical intimacy is one of the most vulnerable things you could ever do. You are literally, especially when you have anxiety, you are releasing control over your body and in some parts, your mind. I think God was very intentional in the way that He designed our husband's body and our body so that they fit together and we become one, meaning that experience is to be experienced as one. That's a very vulnerable thing to say, hey, I'm allowing you to take me to a place where I don't have control over what my body does or how my body feels. Sure, it feels good, but it can also, in a way, feel like you're out of control. And I talked about this in a previous episode about the fear of risk. Even when that risk is good for you, you can have this fear of risk. And sometimes being vulnerable doing physical intimacy requires a lot of risk. The risk to say, hey, I like it when you do this. I don't like it when you do that. When you're actually having dialogue about your needs, and I talk about needs all the time because it is the essence of you feeling securely connected to your husband. When you feel like you're getting your needs met in an intimate setting with your husband, you're developing that sense of secure connection. I know that my husband listens. I know that my husband has my back. He has my best interests at heart. I know that he wants me to experience pleasure. But in order to get to that point, it requires risk. It requires you being vulnerable about expressing that. And it also requires relinquishing control, having a bit of resolve in your body so that you can fully enjoy physical intimacy. Now, again, I know there's logistics. Okay, you might kids doing this in the background. You got all logistics are real, and it's a part of figuring this out as you are raising young kiddos. But it is worth figuring it out. It's worth having that dialogue with your husband about how to help you be more vulnerable in that space as it relates to your physical intimacy. Now, I do want to insert this in because there might be things that have happened in your past, more so related to someone taking advantage of your body, that is stored up. And anytime you go to be physically intimate with your husband, your body has this reminder of this is not a safe activity for us. We end up hurt. We end up sad. We end up having to withdraw and not share anything with what has happened. It's reacting. It's having a response for something that has previously happened and not what has happened with your husband. One, I want to tell you that I get it. I understand. I've been there. Two, which goes back to what I said earlier, be vulnerable with your husband about how what you have experienced is showing up inside of your current bedroom. If you have to wrestle and tussle with, okay, these are the things that reminds me of this, and for right now, until I feel more secure in our physical intimacy, we can't do that, or whatever it is, right? It goes back to, again, expressing your needs around that. And the third but not least, which kind of ties into the fear of being vulnerable, it is the fear of being disappointed. You might be saying, okay, Chasity, I've said all that. I told him about the fear. I told him about what I like and what I don't like. I told him about the vulnerability. I've been here, whatever. Well, you might have a fear of being disappointed that your husband will not actually listen and take into account of what you've already shared. That it's going to cost too much effort for you to actually get your need met. So you're going to end up disappointed at the end. So you might as well not say anything at all. Or you might have this mentality that as long as he's enjoying it, we can get it out the way and I can go back to sleep. It's like you're revving yourself up, embracing yourself to be disappointed anyway. So what happens? You go into those scenarios where he's like, and you're like, okay, let's just go ahead and get it over with. You've already set in your mind that you're going to be disappointed with the experience that you have. So that fear of disappointment is actually keeping you from connecting with your husband in a physical, intimate way, because who wants to sit in disappointment? Who wants to go in knowing that you're already defeated before you get there? And just like with the other two fears, the process of talking about what you need And the action that aligns with that is going to help you move through your physical intimacy life with your husband. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of people push, just have more of it, right? Just get into the action of having more of it, even if you don't feel like it, even if you're tired, even if you don't have the energy for it. And I'm like, we skipping steps because you haven't actually addressed what's the root of causing that dissonance anyway. And if the root is the fear of getting pregnant, if the root is the fear of vulnerability, if the root is the fear of disappointment and it hasn't been addressed, I don't care how many times you do it, you still not gonna like it. And listen, I don't believe the Lord has set you up to have regular smegular physical intimacy life. Okay? I truly believe he wants you to have pleasure. I truly believe the way that he designed our bodies to fit in the way that they fit, the way he designed reaching that place during physical intimacy is so that you can enjoy it, not so that you could be so anxious and agitated around it that you don't even want to have it. He's like, no, I want you to enjoy. This is why I gave it to you. This is why I made it. I want you to enjoy it. So getting back to the enjoyment of it, not just doing it to say that you checked it off of the list. So I want you to identify which fear that you're operating out of right now that might be causing that dissonance in your physical intimacy with your husband. Have the conversation and then go to the action, okay? But get to the action. I think eventually, it's going to help you with the stress levels. You know what I mean? We'll get to it. Eventually. All right, we talk about this more in depth in my program, Legacy. There is a whole phase that's dedicated to helping you build a secure connection with your husband. And one of those things that we go in depth on is teaching you how to communicate your physical intimacy needs with your husband so you don't feel icky, so you don't feel these fears that are impacting the way that you connect. You're able to communicate in the way where your husband not only understands, but knows what to do next to help make sure your connection is secure, it's solid, and it's standing on good ground. To get started, I want you to go to the show notes and take the quiz. It's going to connect those dots for you so that you can see how anxiety has been showing up inside of your marriage. It's going to give you a free training that comes along with that to take a deeper dive, and that will give you not only the understanding of where these things are coming from, but the strategies and things that you actually need to do to move forward. I can't wait to see your results from the quiz and see how your intimacy life starts to shift. All right, I'll see you in the next one.